The barn door swung open with a groan that echoed through the evening stillness, and Quinn Yates froze mid-step when he saw her kneeling in the hay, her dark hair falling like a curtain around a tiny calico kitten pressed against her chest. She looked up at him with eyes the color of sage in summer, wide with surprise and something else, something protective and fierce that made his breath catch in his throat. The woman did not move, did not scramble to her feet or offer excuses for being in his barn outside Verde, Nevada, in the autumn of 1882. Instead, she held his gaze while her hand continued its gentle stroking motion along the kitten's spine, and Quinn found himself rooted to the spot, his saddlebag still slung over his shoulder. "I am sorry for the intrusion," she said, her voice softer than he expected but steady. "I heard them crying from the road. Their mother, she was dead in the ditch. I could not leave them." Quinn set down his bag slowly, his eyes adjusting to the dimming light inside the barn. As his vision sharpened, he saw them. 4 more kittens, tiny and mewling, nestled in the woman's skirt where she had made a makeshift bed with what looked like her own shawl. They could not have been more than a few weeks old, their eyes barely open, their cries pitiful and thin. "How long have you been here?" he asked, moving closer but keeping his movements careful and measured. He had startled enough wild things in his 30 years to know when something might bolt. "Since this afternoon. I tried to feed them with a cloth soaked in milk from my canteen, but I do not think it is enough." She looked down at the kittens, and he saw worry crease her brow. "They need more than I can give them here." Quinn crouched down a few feet away, studying her properly now. She wore a simple gray dress, travel-worn and dusty, with a bonnet hanging down her back by its ribbons. Her face was smudged with dirt, and there were dark circles under those remarkable eyes that spoke of exhaustion deeper than one afternoon of kitten rescuing could cause. She was young, perhaps 23 or 24, and there was something about the set of her shoulders, the way she held herself, that told him she had been carrying burdens for far longer than she should have. "What is your name?" he asked. "Hannah Nielson." She studied him in return, taking in his worn boots, his dusty chaps, the hat he had pulled off when he entered the barn. "I promise I meant no harm. I can leave if you want, but the kittens, they need somewhere warm for the night at least." "Hannah Nielson," Quinn repeated, tasting the name. "Where were you headed when you found them?" She hesitated, and in that hesitation he read volumes. She had nowhere to go. She was alone. She was running from something or to something, or perhaps just running. "I was looking for work," she said finally. "In Verde or Reno or wherever I might find it. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend a garden. I worked in a boarding house in Sacramento before." She paused, "before I had to leave." Quinn sat back on his heels, his mind working. The ranch was not large, just 150 acres with enough cattle to keep him and his 2 hired hands busy. But it was his, earned with years of hard work and careful saving. His mother had passed 2 years ago, and since then the house had been quiet, too quiet, with just him rattling around in rooms that remembered laughter and warmth. "You have anywhere to stay tonight?" he asked. Hannah shook her head. "I was going to find a boarding house in town, but then I found these little ones, and I just could not leave them crying there in the cold." The calico in her arms let out a weak mew, as if punctuating her words. Quinn stood and walked to the corner of the barn where he kept supplies. He found a wooden crate and an old horse blanket, bringing them back to where Hannah sat. "Put them in here for now," he said. "We will take them up to the house. I have a friend, old Doc Morrison, who knows about animals. He might have some ideas about how to keep them fed proper." Hannah's face transformed, relief and gratitude washing over her features like sunrise. Thank you so much." She carefully transferred each kitten into the crate, her movements gentle and practiced, as if she had spent her whole life handling fragile things. Quinn watched her hands, noticed how her fingers trembled slightly, whether from cold or hunger or fear he could not tell. "When did you last eat?" he asked. The color rose in her cheeks. "This morning. I had some bread." Quinn picked up the crate, careful not to jostle the kittens. "Come on, then. Let us get these little ones settled and get some food in you. You can stay in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow we will figure out the rest." He saw her hesitate again, saw her weigh the dangers of accepting help from a stranger against whatever alternatives she faced, and it made something in his chest tighten. What had happened to her to make her so wary? "I do not expect anything," he said quietly, meeting her eyes. "My mother, she raised me better than that. You need help and I have a spare room and food to share. That is all there is to it." Hannah stood slowly, brushing hay from her skirt. She was taller than he had first thought, perhaps 5.5 feet, and slender in a way that spoke more of missed meals than natural build. "I can work for my keep. I was not asking for charity." "I did not figure you were," Quinn said, and he meant it. There was pride in the set of her jaw, dignity in how she held herself despite her circumstances. "But right now, let us just get through tonight. We can talk about work arrangements tomorrow if you want." He led the way out of the barn and across the yard to the house, a sturdy 2-story structure his father had built 20 years ago when he first claimed this land. The paint was peeling a bit on the shutters, and the porch could use some repairs, but it was solid and warm and had always felt like home. He hoped it might feel welcoming to her too, at least for one night. Inside, he set the crate near the stove, which still held embers from the morning. He stirred the fire back to life and added more wood while Hannah stood uncertainly in the doorway, looking around the kitchen with its big wooden table, its shelves of dishes, its curtains his mother had sewn from flour sacks and dyed a cheerful yellow. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Let me see what I can put together for supper." "I can cook," Hannah said quickly. "Really, if you just show me where things are, I can prepare the meal. It is the least I can do." Quinn considered arguing, then saw the need in her eyes. She needed to do this, needed to contribute, to maintain that sense of dignity that was clearly holding her together. "All right," he said. "Flour and beans in that cupboard, salt pork in the cold box outside the back door, eggs in the basket on the counter. I will go fetch Doc Morrison about the kittens." He saw her shoulders relax, saw her nod and turn toward the cupboards with purpose. As he headed for the door, he paused. "Hannah," she turned, a mixing bowl already in her hands. "I am glad you stopped at my barn," he said. Her smile was small but genuine. "So am I, Mr. Yates." "Quinn," he said. "Just Quinn." The ride into Verde took only 15 minutes, the sun setting in brilliant oranges and purples over the Sierra Nevada mountains to the west. The town was small, barely more than a collection of buildings along the railroad line, but it had everything essential. A general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, and Doc Morrison's office, which doubled as the closest thing to a hospital for 30 miles. Quinn found the doc finishing up his supper in the back room of his office, a book open beside his plate. Charles Morrison was 63, gray-bearded, and had been patching up people and animals in Nevada since before Quinn was born. He listened to Quinn's explanation with interest, his bushy eyebrows rising when Quinn mentioned Hannah. "So you have got a strange woman and 5 orphaned kittens in your house," Doc said, closing his book. "That is quite an evening, Quinn. Can you help with the kittens?" Quinn asked, ignoring the implied question about Hannah. Doc stood, reaching for his bag. "I've got some bottles and rubber tips that might work, and I can show her how to mix up a formula that is closer to what they need than just milk." But Quinn, these kittens, they are young. Even with the best care, they might not all make it. I know, Quinn said, but we have got to try. They rode back together as the stars began to appear overhead, bright and cold in the Nevada sky. Doc asked no questions about Hannah, for which Quinn was grateful, though he knew the old doctor's mind was working, piecing together the situation from what little Quinn had said. When they entered the kitchen, the smell of cornbread and beans filled the air, and Hannah was setting the table with his mother's dishes. She had found an apron hanging on a peg and tied it around her waist, and she had washed her face and hands at the pump. She looked up when they entered, her expression wary again until Quinn made the introductions. "Miss Nielson, this is Doc Morrison. He is going to help us with the kittens." Hannah wiped her hands on the apron and stepped forward. "Thank you for coming, Doctor. I know it is late." "Not at all, my dear." Doc set his bag on the table and moved to the crate where the kittens were huddled together. "Let us have a look at these little ones." While Doc examined the kittens, Hannah served supper, setting full plates in front of both men before taking a smaller portion for herself. Quinn noticed and wordlessly transferred half his cornbread to her plate. She opened her mouth to protest, then seemed to think better of it, nodding her thanks instead. Doc declared the kittens to be in reasonably good shape considering their circumstances, though he echoed his earlier warning that their survival was not guaranteed. He showed Hannah how to use the small bottles he had brought, how to mix the goat milk formula with a bit of egg and cream, how to keep them warm and fed every few hours. "It is going to be round-the-clock work for the next few weeks," he warned. "They need to eat every 2 to 3 hours, even at night." "I can do it," Hannah said firmly. "I will do whatever they need." After Doc left with promises to check back in a few days, Quinn and Hannah cleaned up the supper dishes together in companionable silence. He washed while she dried, and he found himself acutely aware of her presence beside him, the way she moved, efficient and graceful, the way she handled his mother's dishes with care. "The guest room is upstairs, second door on the right," he said when they finished. "There are clean linens on the bed, and the washstand has fresh water. You can bring the kittens up with you if you want to make the night feedings easier." "Thank you, Quinn." She met his eyes, and he saw the exhaustion there, but also something else, a warmth that had not been present when he first found her in the barn. "I do not know what I would have done if you had not been so kind." He wanted to ask her then, wanted to know her story, what had brought her alone to Nevada with nothing but a dusty dress and the kindness in her heart that made her stop for crying kittens. But he could see she was barely standing, swaying with fatigue, so he just nodded and showed her to the room. "Sleep well, Hannah. We will talk more tomorrow." He lay in his own bed later, listening to the old house settle around him, and thought about sage-green eyes and gentle hands and the way she had looked at those kittens like they were precious things worth saving. His mother used to say you could tell the measure of a person by how they treated creatures that could do nothing for them in return. By that measure, Hannah Nielson was someone special. He fell asleep thinking about the way she had smiled when he told her she could stay. Quinn woke before dawn, as was his habit, to the sound of soft singing drifting up from the kitchen. He dressed quickly and made his way downstairs to find Hannah already up, one kitten in her arms while the others slept in their crate near the stove. She was swaying slightly, humming a tune he did not recognize, coaxing the tiny creature to take the bottle. "You did not get much sleep," he observed from the doorway. She turned, startled, then smiled. "Neither did you, I think. You are up very early. Ranch does not run itself." He moved to the stove and started the coffee, a morning ritual so ingrained he could do it half asleep. "How are they doing?" "Better, I think. They have all eaten at least once through the night, though this little one," she lifted the calico slightly. She is not taking as much as the others. I am worried about her. Quinn came to look. The calico was noticeably smaller than its siblings and its movements were weaker. Keep trying, he said. Sometimes the runts surprise you. They have got more fight in them than you would think. Hannah nodded, turning her attention back to the kitten with such focus and determination that Quinn felt something shift in his chest. He poured 2 cups of coffee when it was ready, setting one beside her. "Tell me about the ranch," she said after a moment. "How long have you been here?" "My father claimed this land in 1862, Quinn said, settling into a chair at the table. "Built the house, started the herd from nothing. I grew up here, helping him and my mother with everything. When he passed 8 years ago, I kept it going. My mother stayed until she died 2 years back. Since then, it has just been me and 2 hands, Jake and Tommy. They are good men, hard workers. It must be lonely," Hannah said softly, "living here alone." Quinn thought about that. "Sometimes, but it is home. It is what I know." He paused. "What about you? You said you came from Sacramento," her hand stilled on the kitten. "Yes, I worked in a boarding house there for 2 years. Before that, I lived in San Francisco with my aunt after my parents died. Yellow fever when I was 16. "I am sorry," Quinn said. Hannah set the now sleeping calico back in the crate and picked up another kitten, starting the feeding process again. "My aunt, she was not unkind, but she had 8 children of her own and very little money. When I was old enough, I went to work to support myself. The boarding house was good work, honest work. The owner, Mrs. Patterson, she taught me a lot about cooking and managing a household." "What made you leave?" Quinn asked, then immediately regretted the question when he saw her tense. "You do not have to tell me if you do not want to." But Hannah shook her head. "No, it is all right. You have been nothing but generous. You deserve to know what kind of person you have invited into your home." She took a deep breath. "Mrs. Patterson's son came back from the East about 6 months ago. He took an interest in me, the kind of interest I did not welcome. When I refused his advances, he told his mother I had been stealing from the household funds. Quinn felt anger kindle in his gut, and she believed him. He is her son," Hannah said simply. "And I am just a girl who appeared in her house with no references, no family, nothing but my word. She dismissed me without a character reference. After that, I could not find work anywhere in Sacramento. His lies spread, so I took what little money I had saved and decided to try somewhere new." She looked up at him, her eyes clear and direct. "I did not steal anything, Quinn, I swear to you." "I believe you," he said, and he meant it. He had only known her less than a day, but everything about her spoke of honesty and integrity. "You are welcome to stay here as long as you need. If you want to earn your keep, I could use help with the house and the cooking. My skills in the kitchen leave much to be desired, and the place could use a woman's touch. My mother, she kept everything so nice, but I am not much good at that sort of thing." Hope flickered across Hannah's face, bright and tentative. "You are offering me a job, room, board, and fair wages," Quinn confirmed. "If you want it. No obligations beyond honest work, and you would be free to leave whenever you choose. I can even write you a character reference so you can find something in town if you prefer." "I want it," Hannah said quickly. "I mean, yes, I would like to accept your offer very much. Thank you, Quinn." The relief in her voice made him realize how desperate her situation had been, how much courage it must have taken to keep going when everything had turned against her. "Then it is settled. Consider yourself hired, Miss Nielson." "Hannah," she said, echoing his words from the night before. "Just Hannah." The smile they shared felt like a promise of something, though Quinn could not have said what. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that felt natural, as if Hannah had always been part of the ranch. She rose early to feed the kittens and prepare breakfast for Quinn and his hired hands. Jake Thompson and Tommy Reed had been surprised to find a woman in the house that first morning, but they had quickly warmed to Hannah's cooking and quiet efficiency. She cleaned and mended and kept the house in order, transforming it back into the welcoming home it had been when Quinn's mother was alive. The kittens thrived under her care, all except the little Calico, who remained worryingly small and weak despite Hannah's devoted attention. Quinn often found her in the kitchen late at night, the Calico wrapped in a soft cloth against her chest, trying to coax it to take just a little more formula. "You need to sleep," he said one night, finding her there past midnight. "She needs me more," Hannah replied, not looking up from the kitten. "She is fighting so hard, Quinn. I cannot give up on her." He sat down across from her, watching the way her fingers stroked the tiny head with such tenderness. "What will you name them?" "We cannot keep calling them the orange one and the tabby forever." Hannah smiled. "I have been thinking about that. The big orange Tom, he should be Rusty, and the two tabbies, they could be Sage and Silver, the black one with white paws, that is Boots for sure. And this one." Quinn gestured to the Calico. "Hope," Hannah said softly. "Her name is Hope." Quinn felt something tighten in his chest at the way she said it, like the kitten's name was a prayer. "Hope is a good name." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the soft mewing of the kittens. Finally, Quinn spoke. "You are good at this, you know, caring for things. You have a gift." Hannah looked up, her eyes bright in the firelight. "My mother used to say that kindness was the only thing we could give that never ran out. Even when we had nothing else, we could always choose to be kind." She sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. Hannah's voice was wistful. "I wish you could have met her." "I think she would have liked you." "I think I would have liked her too," Quinn said, "if she raised a daughter like you." The color rose in Hannah's cheeks, and she looked back down at the kitten, but not before Quinn saw the pleasure his words brought her. He realized, sitting there in his kitchen with this woman he had known for barely 3 weeks, that he was falling in love with her. It was not a thunderbolt or a dramatic revelation, just a quiet certainty settling into his bones like the way he knew spring would follow winter. He loved the way she sang to the kittens when she thought no one was listening. He loved how she had organized his chaotic pantry without asking, how she left wildflowers in jars around the house, how she laughed at Jake's terrible jokes and helped Tommy learn his letters in the evenings. He loved her fierce determination and her gentle heart, and the way she saw the best in everyone she met. But he said nothing, just sat with her in the warm kitchen and thought about how empty the house would feel if she ever left. October turned to November, and the kittens grew stronger, even little Hope, who seemed to have turned a corner in her fight for survival. They were weaned now, tumbling around the kitchen in a chaos of fur and tiny paws, getting into everything and making Hannah laugh with their antics. Quinn found excuses to spend more time in the house, fixing the hinge on a cupboard door that had been broken for months, replacing the cracked window pane in the parlor, repairing the loose board on the porch steps. Really, he just wanted to be near Hannah, to hear her voice, to see her smile. Jake noticed, of course. The older man had worked for Quinn's father and had known Quinn since he was a boy. He cornered Quinn in the barn one afternoon, ostensibly to discuss moving the cattle to winter pasture, but really to meddle. "You going to tell her how you feel?" Jake asked, getting straight to the point as always. Quinn tightened the cinch on his saddle with more force than necessary. "I do not know what you mean." "The hell you do not." Jake leaned against a stall door, his weathered face creasing in a knowing smile. "You look at that girl like she hung the moon, Quinn. Have since the day she got here." "She has been through a lot," Quinn said, avoiding Jake's eyes. "She needs stability right now, not some cowboy with dirt under his nails making things complicated." You think you are not good enough for her." Jake sounded genuinely surprised. "Boy, you own a successful ranch. You are kind and honest and harder working than any 3 men I know. What makes you think she would not want you?" "She might feel obligated," Quinn said quietly. "I gave her a job, a place to stay when she had nowhere else to go. If I tell her how I feel, she might think she has to reciprocate to keep her position here. I will not put that pressure on her." Jake was quiet for a moment, considering. "That is mighty noble of you, Quinn. Mighty stupid too, but noble. What if she feels the same way? What if she is waiting for you to make a move?" "Then she will keep waiting," Quinn said firmly. "I am not going to risk making her uncomfortable in her own home." "Her own home," Jake repeated thoughtfully. "Interesting way to put it." Quinn swung into the saddle, done with the conversation. "We are moving the cattle tomorrow. Make sure Tommy knows to be ready at dawn." But Jake's words stayed with him as he rode out to check the fence line. What if Hannah did feel the same way? He had caught her watching him sometimes, had seen something soft in her eyes when he came in from a long day's work, and she set a plate of warm food in front of him. When their hands accidentally touched reaching for the same thing, she did not pull away immediately. She seemed to seek out his company in the evenings, sitting with him on the porch even after her work was done. Or maybe he was just seeing what he wanted to see, reading romance into simple kindness and companionship. The first snow came in early December, dusting the mountains white and reminding them all that winter was settling in. Hannah had the house ready, the root cellar stocked with preserved vegetables, the wood shed full, extra blankets aired and ready. She moved through the preparations with competent efficiency, but Quinn could see the worry in her eyes. "What is wrong?" he asked one evening as they sat by the fire, the kittens, now nearly grown cats, dozing in various spots around the room. Hannah looked up from the sock she was mending. "I was just thinking about how different this winter will be from last year. Last year I was in Sacramento, alone in a cold room in the boarding house, wondering if I would ever have a real home again." She paused, her eyes shining. "And now I am here in this warm house with you and the cats, and I feel more at home than I have since my parents died. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for it all to be taken away." Quinn set down the account book he had been pretending to read. "Nothing is going to take this away, Hannah. You have a place here for as long as you want it." "But what if something happens?" Her voice was small. "What if you decide you do not need me anymore? Or you get married and your wife does not want another woman in the house? Or I just do not know something?" He could not help it. He moved from his chair to sit beside her on the sofa, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Hannah, look at me." She did, her sage green eyes wide and uncertain. "You are not just hired help to me," he said carefully, choosing each word with precision. "You are my friend. You have made this house a home again, and not just with your cooking and cleaning. You have brought light back into a place that was dark for too long. I will not ask you to leave, not ever, not unless it is what you want." "What if I never want to leave?" she whispered. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she must hear it. "Then you never have to." They sat there, close but not quite touching, the fire crackling and the cats purring, and Quinn felt the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. He wanted to kiss her, wanted to pull her into his arms and tell her everything he felt, but he held back, kept his promise to himself not to pressure her. It was Hannah who closed the distance, leaning her head on his shoulder with a soft sigh. "Thank you, Quinn, for everything." He let his cheek rest against her hair, breathing in the scent of lavender soap and wood smoke. "Nothing to thank me for." But there was, and they both knew it. Christmas came, and Hannah decorated the house with pine boughs and strings of popped corn. She baked cookies and pies, filling the house with the scents of cinnamon and nutmeg. Quinn had ridden into Reno the week before, making an excuse about needing supplies, but really he had gone to buy her a present. He gave it to her Christmas morning, a small box wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a brooch in the shape of a cat, made of silver with tiny green stones for eyes. It was not expensive or fancy, but when Hannah opened it, her eyes filled with tears. "It is perfect," she said, tracing the delicate metalwork with her finger. "Quinn, I did not get you anything." "I should have, but I did not know if it would be appropriate." "You have given me more than you know," he said. "You gave me my home back." She pinned the brooch to her dress, right over her heart, and smiled at him with such warmth that he nearly forgot every promise he had made to himself about keeping his distance. The winter deepened, and they fell into an even closer rhythm, spending long evenings by the fire talking about everything and nothing. She told him about her childhood in San Francisco, about her dreams of having a family someday, a real home filled with love and laughter. He told her about his parents, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the satisfaction of building something with your own hands and watching it grow. Jake and Tommy spent most nights in the bunkhouse now that the weather had turned, giving Quinn and Hannah privacy that felt both welcome and dangerous. Dangerous because every evening brought them closer, made it harder for Quinn to remember why he was holding back. It was Hannah who finally forced the issue on a cold night in January when the wind howled outside and the fire burned low. They were sitting together on the sofa, as had become their habit, and she was reading aloud from a book of poetry. She paused between poems and turned to look at him. "Quinn, can I ask you something?" "Anything," he said. "Why did you really let me stay that first night?" He considered lying or deflecting, but her eyes demanded honesty. "Because when I saw you in that barn, protecting those kittens even though you had nothing, even though you were alone and scared, I knew you were someone special, someone worth knowing. And now," her voice was barely above a whisper, "what am I to you now?" This was it, the moment he had been avoiding and longing for in equal measure. He could lie, could tell her she was a friend and a valued member of the household, and it would be true as far as it went. Or he could risk everything by telling her the whole truth. He chose truth. "Now you are everything," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing I think about before I sleep. You are the reason I hurry through my work so I can get back to the house. You are the reason this place feels like home again. I love you, Hannah. I have loved you probably since that first night, and I know I have no right to tell you this. I know you might feel obligated because I gave you a job, but I cannot keep it inside anymore." Hannah's eyes were bright with tears, but she was smiling so wide it lit up her whole face. "You are an idiot, Quinn Yates." He blinked, not sure he had heard correctly. "What? An idiot?" she repeated, laughing and crying at the same time. "Do you have any idea how long I have been waiting for you to say something? I have been in love with you for months, but I thought you just saw me as a housekeeper, someone useful but nothing more. I have been dropping hints and trying to show you how I felt, and you just kept being friendly and kind but nothing more, and I thought I was going to lose my mind. You love me." Quinn felt like the world had tilted on its axis. "Of course I love you." Hannah set the book aside and took his hands in hers. "How could I not? You are good and kind and gentle, and you took me in when I had nothing. You believed in me when no one else did. You made me feel safe and valued and like I mattered. I love you so much it scares me sometimes." Quinn reached up to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I did not want you to feel pressured. I did not want you to think you had to care for me to keep your place here." "My place here," Hannah said, leaning into his touch, "has nothing to do with work anymore." It has everything to do with you and how you make me feel. Like I am home. Like I am exactly where I am supposed to be." He kissed her then, finally, a kiss that tasted of tears and joy and promises. It was gentle and sweet and perfect, and when they pulled apart, they were both smiling. "Marry me," Quinn said, the words spilling out before he could think better of them. "I know it is fast, I know we should probably wait, but marry me, Hannah. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." "Yes," Hannah said, kissing him again. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." They sat there for hours, talking and kissing and making plans, the fire burning down to embers around them. Hope, the little calico cat, jumped up onto Hannah's lap and purred as if giving her blessing to the arrangement. Quinn stroked the cat's head and marveled at how a simple act of kindness, Hannah stopping to save crying kittens, had led to this moment, to this love that felt like it would last forever. "I almost did not stop that day," Hannah confessed, her head on his shoulder. "I was so tired and hungry, and I thought I should just keep going, find the nearest town and figure things out. But I heard them crying and I could not walk past. I had to help them." "Thank God you did," Quinn said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "That was the best decision you ever made." "The second best," Hannah corrected, smiling up at him. "The best was saying yes to you just now." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Verdi. Doc Morrison stood up as Quinn's witness, and Mrs. Patterson's niece, who happened to be visiting relatives in Reno and had always been kind to Hannah, came to stand with her. Jake and Tommy cleaned up nicely and sat in the front pew, grinning like fools through the whole service. Hannah wore a new dress in deep green that matched her eyes, bought with money Quinn had insisted she take as back wages. He had his father's good suit altered to fit, and he wore a new string tie that Hannah said made him look distinguished. But really, he could have been wearing rags and she could have been in burlap, and it would not have mattered. What mattered was the way she looked at him when she said, "I do." The way her hand trembled in his when he slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, the way she kissed him when the minister pronounced them husband and wife. They had a small celebration at the house afterward, with Jake playing his fiddle and Mrs. Patterson's niece, whose name was Clara, teaching Hannah some fancy dance steps she had learned back east. Tommy got into the whiskey and made a rambling toast about true love conquering all that had everyone laughing. Even the cats seemed to be celebrating, chasing each other around the house in elaborate games of tag. When everyone finally left and they were alone, Quinn carried Hannah over the threshold of their bedroom, setting her down gently on the rug. She looked up at him, her eyes soft with love and trust, and he felt humbled by the gift of her. "Are you happy?" he asked, needing to hear it. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," Hannah said, reaching up to touch his face. "I feel like my whole life has been leading to this moment to you. Everything that happened, all the hard times and the sadness, it all brought me here. And I would go through it all again if it meant ending up with you." They made love that night with tender care and patience, learning each other's bodies as they had learned each other's hearts. Quinn had been with women before, quick encounters that meant nothing beyond momentary pleasure, but this was different. This was sacred. This was joining himself to someone he loved more than his own life, creating something beautiful and permanent and real. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, talking in whispers even though there was no one to overhear. Hannah traced the scars on his hands and arms, souvenirs from years of ranch work, and told him stories about the people she had met at the boarding house. Quinn played with her long dark hair and wondered how he had gotten so lucky. "I want to give you everything," he said. "Everything you have ever dreamed of. You already have," Hannah replied. You gave me a home and a future and yourself. What more could I possibly want?" But Quinn was already planning, thinking about ways to make the ranch more profitable, about adding to the house so they would have room for the family he hoped they would build together. He wanted to give Hannah security and comfort and every good thing he could imagine. Winter gave way to spring, and with it came new life. The cattle had calves, the chickens Hannah had insisted they acquire laid eggs in abundance, and the garden she planted behind the house sprouted green and promising. She worked alongside Quinn and the hired men when she could, learning to ride well enough to help move cattle, getting sunburned and dusty and more beautiful every day. In May, she told him she was pregnant. They were sitting on the porch in the evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and rose when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There is a baby here," she said, her eyes searching his face. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Quinn felt joy so intense it almost hurt. "Happy does not even begin to cover it. You are sure?" "I am sure," Hannah laughed. "I have been feeling poorly in the mornings for weeks, and I knew. The way my mother always said she knew with me, like your body is telling you the most wonderful secret." He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she were made of spun glass. "I love you so much. You and this baby, you are my whole world." "We love you too," Hannah said, and he could hear the tears in her voice. "So very much." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. Hannah bloomed, her body rounding with the growing child, her face taking on a glow that Quinn thought must be what painters meant when they talked about capturing light. She sewed tiny clothes and knitted small blankets, humming the same songs she used to sing to the kittens. The cats, now full grown, seemed to sense the change in Hannah. Hope especially became her constant shadow, curling up beside her whenever she sat down, purring against her belly as if greeting the baby within. Quinn would often find Hannah talking to the baby, telling it about its father and the ranch and the big wide world it would soon enter. "I hope it is a boy," she said one evening in August. "A strong, kind boy like his father." "I hope it is healthy," Quinn countered. "Boy or girl, as long as it has your heart and your courage, I will be the happiest man alive." Labor came on a cold night in December, almost exactly a year after Quinn had first told Hannah he loved her. Doc Morrison arrived with the midwife, a capable woman named Martha who had delivered half the babies in the county. They sent Quinn out of the room and he paced the kitchen with Jake and Tommy, wearing a path in the floorboards. "She will be fine," Jake said, though he looked worried too. "She is strong, that wife of yours." The hours stretched on, and every cry from upstairs made Quinn flinch. He wanted to be with her, wanted to hold her hand and tell her she was brave, but Martha had been firm that men had no place in a birthing room. So he paced and prayed and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Finally, as dawn was breaking, he heard it, the thin, reedy wail of a newborn baby. He was halfway up the stairs before he remembered he should probably wait to be called, but then Doc Morrison appeared at the top, grinning broadly. "You have a son," the old doctor said. "A big, healthy boy with lungs like a locomotive. And your wife, she is tired but doing just fine. Come meet your son, Quinn." The room smelled of blood and sweat and something else, something primal and earthy. Hannah was propped up in bed, her hair damp with perspiration, her face exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made, and when Quinn approached, she pulled the blanket back to show him the most perfect thing he had ever seen. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face that was already smoothing into something beautiful. His tiny fists waved in the air, and his eyes, when they opened briefly, were dark and unfocused, but somehow aware. "Say hello to your papa," Hannah whispered to the baby, then looked up at Quinn with such love it took his breath away. "What should we name him?" Quinn reached out a tentative finger, touching the baby's impossibly small hand. The baby's fist closed around his finger with surprising strength, and Quinn felt something in his chest crack open. "James," he said, thinking of his father. "James Robert Yates, if that is all right with you." "It is perfect," Hannah said. "Hello, James. Welcome home, little one." Quinn sat on the edge of the bed, putting his arm around Hannah and gazing down at their son. Hope jumped up onto the bed and sniffed at the baby curiously, then settled at Hannah's side as if taking up guard duty. "Thank you," Quinn said to Hannah, his voice thick. "Thank you for all of this." "We are a family now," Hannah said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "A real family." "We have been a family since the day I found you in that barn," Quinn corrected. "But I will admit, this makes it feel even more real." James Robert Yates grew from a red-faced newborn into a chubby, happy baby who seemed to find joy in everything. He laughed at the cats, who tolerated his clumsy petting with feline patience. He babbled constantly, as if he had important things to say, and was frustrated by his inability to form words. He adored his mother and father in equal measure, reaching for them with chubby hands and giving them gummy smiles that melted their hearts. Quinn had never known he could feel love like this, overwhelming and fierce and tender all at once. He would work all day in the sun and wind, and the thought of coming home to Hannah and James would keep him going through the hardest tasks. He would hold his son in the evenings, rocking him to sleep while Hannah cleaned up from supper, and feel such contentment it was almost frightening. Surely nothing this good could last, but it did last. The seasons turned, bringing new challenges and new joys. The ranch prospered under Quinn's careful management, and they were able to add onto the house, creating more space for their growing family. Hannah had been right to hope for more children. 2 years after James, they welcomed a daughter named Mary Patricia, who had her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn chin. And 3 years after that, another son, Thomas Edward, who was born laughing and never seemed to stop. The house was loud now, full of children's voices and running feet and the organized chaos that comes with a young family. Hannah moved through it all with grace and humor, somehow managing to keep everyone fed and clothed and loved. Quinn often found himself stopping in the middle of a task just to watch her with the children, to marvel at the life they had built together. Jake retired when James turned 5, moving to a small house in Verdi, but visiting often to teach the boy about horses and roping, and all the skills a rancher's son should know. Tommy got married to Clara, Mrs. Patterson's niece, who had stood up at Quinn and Hannah's wedding, and they built a cabin on the edge of the property. Tommy continued to work for Quinn, but now his wife worked alongside him, and they were expecting their first child by the summer. The cats lived long lives, Hope especially defying expectations to make it to 15 years old. When she finally passed peacefully in her sleep, the whole family mourned her, remembering how she had been the littlest and weakest but had fought so hard to survive. They buried her in the garden and Hannah planted roses over her grave. She was special, Hannah said, tears on her cheeks as they stood together by the grave. The children had gone inside, but Quinn had stayed with his wife, knowing she needed this moment. If I had not stopped for her and her siblings that day, I wonder where I would be now. Not here, Quinn said, pulling her close. And I cannot imagine my life without you in it. That little cat, she brought us together in a way. Maybe that was her purpose all along. I like to think so, Hannah said. I like to think everything happens for a reason, even the hard things, especially the hard things. Quinn thought about that often in the years that followed. He thought about how Hannah's misfortunes in Sacramento, things that must have seemed like the end of the world at the time, had led her to Nevada. He thought about how a moment of compassion for crying kittens had changed the course of both their lives. He thought about how easily they might have missed each other, ships passing in the night, and he was grateful beyond measure that they had not. The children grew. James became a skilled horseman and took to ranching like he had been born to it, which Quinn supposed he had been. Mary showed more interest in books and learning, and Quinn and Hannah made sure she had every opportunity to develop her mind, even when the neighbors questioned the wisdom of educating a girl so thoroughly. Thomas was the adventurer, always getting into scrapes and coming home with torn clothes and wild stories. Quinn and Hannah grew older together, their hair silvering, their hands becoming work-worn and weather-beaten. But the love between them never faded. If anything, it deepened with time, becoming something stronger and more resilient than the passionate romance of their early days. They knew each other completely, could communicate with a glance, could anticipate each other's needs and wants without speaking. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Quinn took Hannah back to the barn where he had first found her. They had rebuilt it some years ago, making it larger and more modern, but the spot where she had knelt with the kittens was still there, still marked by the same worn boards. "Do you remember?" he asked, standing in that exact spot. "Of course I remember," Hannah said, coming to stand beside him. "I was so scared and so tired, and I did not know what I was going to do. And then you walked in, and even though I did not know it yet, my whole life was about to change." "Mine too," Quinn said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I got you something." Hannah opened it to find another brooch, this one showing a cat with 5 kittens around her feet. It was beautifully crafted, each tiny cat detailed and perfect. "Quinn, it is beautiful. 25 years ago, you showed me what your heart was like," Quinn said. "You were sheltering those kittens, protecting them, caring for them even though you had nothing yourself. And I knew right then that you were someone who would shelter my heart too if I was brave enough to give it to you. I have never regretted that decision, Hannah, not for one single day." Hannah was crying now, but smiling too. "I love you, Quinn Yates. I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you until the end." "And beyond," Quinn said, kissing her. "And beyond." They stood there in the barn, holding each other as the late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, and Quinn thought about how a single moment of kindness could change everything. Hannah had stopped to help creatures that could do nothing for her in return, and in doing so, she had revealed her true nature. She was someone who sheltered and protected and loved without reservation, and he had been blessed beyond measure to be the recipient of that love. The children had children, and the house that had once been so quiet now rang with the laughter of grandchildren. James married a sweet-tempered woman named Sarah and took over more of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, giving Quinn and Hannah time to enjoy their later years. Mary became a teacher, opening a school in Verde and educating a generation of children with the same patience and care her mother had shown her. Thomas went east for a while, seeking adventure, but eventually returned home with a bride and a newfound appreciation for the land he had grown up on. Quinn and Hannah watched it all with satisfaction, knowing they had built something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. They had created not just a family, but a legacy of love and kindness and hard work. On a warm summer evening, when Quinn was 67 and Hannah 64, they sat on the porch together watching the sun set over the mountains. Their hands were clasped, fingers intertwined, as they had been so many times over the years. The house behind them was full of family visiting for the weekend, their voices drifting out through the open windows. "You ever wonder how different things might have been?" Hannah asked. If I had not found those kittens, or if you had been away from the ranch that day, or any number of things that might have kept us apart. I try not to, Quinn admitted. It makes my blood run cold to think of a life without you in it. I think we were meant to find each other, Hannah. I think fate or God or whatever you want to call it put you in my barn that day because we belonged together. I think so too, Hannah said, squeezing his hand. I think I was always meant to be yours and you were always meant to be mine. We just had to find each other first. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple, and Quinn thought about all the sunsets they had watched together, all the days and nights and seasons that had passed since that November evening when his whole world changed. He had been a lonely man living in a house full of memories, and she had been a desperate woman with nowhere to go. Now they were grandparents and pillars of the community and, most importantly, deeply in love. I would do it all again, Hannah said suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. Every hard moment, every struggle, every time I was scared or hurt or lost, I would do it all again exactly the same way if it meant ending up here with you. So would I, Quinn said. So would I. When Hannah passed away in her sleep at the age of 79, Quinn felt like part of his soul had been torn away. She had been his partner, his love, his best friend for over 4 decades, and the world without her in it seemed dimmer, less vibrant. But even in his grief, he was grateful. Grateful for every day they had shared, every laugh and tear and quiet moment. Grateful that he had been brave enough to ask her to stay that first night, and that she had been brave enough to say yes. He lived another 3 years, spending them with his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandmother and the life they had built together. He told them about the kittens in the barn and how their grandmother's kindness had captured his heart. He told them about the importance of being gentle with fragile things and fierce in protecting what you love. He told them that the best things in life often come when you least expect them, and that saying yes to love, even when it is scary, is always worth it. When Quinn died peacefully in his sleep at 82, they buried him beside Hannah in the little cemetery outside Verde. The whole town turned out for the funeral. 3 generations of the family he and Hannah had created, all of them testament to the love they had shared. On his gravestone, below his name and dates, James had inscribed a simple line. He sheltered her heart, and she sheltered his. The ranch continued on, passed down through the family, each generation adding to the legacy Quinn and Hannah had started. The house remained, expanded and modernized, but still recognizably the same structure where they had built their life together. And in the barn, now over 100 years old but still standing strong, there was a small plaque marking the spot where it all began, where a lonely cowboy found a woman sheltering kittens and knew, in that instant, that she would shelter his heart too. The story of Quinn and Hannah Yates became something of a legend in Verde, told and retold by families around dinner tables, a reminder that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, and that small acts of kindness can change the course of a life. Young couples would visit their graves, leaving flowers and making wishes, hoping that they too might find a love as enduring and true. And somewhere, in some realm beyond mortal understanding, Quinn and Hannah were together again, walking hand in hand through fields of gold, surrounded by cats and children and all the love they had created in their time on earth. They had lived well and loved deeply, and their story, like all great love stories, would never truly end. It would live on in the hearts of those who heard it, a beacon of hope that true love exists, that kindness matters, and that sometimes, when you least expect it, your whole life can change because you stopped to help a crying kitten in a dusty barn. The years rolled on, and the family Quinn and Hannah had created spread across Nevada and beyond, each carrying with them the values their great-great-grandparents had exemplified. The importance of kindness, the value of hard work, the knowledge that love is the most important thing we can give each other. And every time someone in that family stopped to help a stranger, every time they chose compassion over convenience, every time they opened their heart to love even when it was frightening, they honored the memory of Quinn and Hannah Yates. The ranch itself remained in the family for generations, a testament to Quinn's dream of building something lasting. The land that had once been raw and wild was now productive and beautiful, shaped by loving hands over decades. The house, much expanded from the simple two-story structure Quinn's father had built, stood strong against the Nevada winds, its walls holding centuries of memories, of laughter and tears, of births and deaths, of all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that make up a life well lived. In the garden behind the house, roses still bloomed over Hope's grave, wild and fragrant, their petals opening each summer to the Nevada sun. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light was just right, people swore they could see the ghost of a small calico cat, watching over the family she had inadvertently helped create, purring her approval at how it had all turned out. But those were just stories, the kind people told to add magic to an already magical tale. The real magic had been in the choice Hannah made that day to stop and help, in the choice Quinn made to offer kindness to a stranger, in all the small daily choices they made over 4 decades to love each other well. That was the real miracle, not ghostly cats or fate or divine intervention, but the simple human capacity to love and be loved in return. And so the story of the cowboy who found a woman sheltering kittens in his barn and knew she would shelter his heart too, became more than just a story. It became a legacy, a lesson, a reminder that the best things in life often come wrapped in unexpected packages, that kindness is never wasted, and that love, real love, is worth every risk and every fear and every moment of uncertainty. In the end, Quinn had been right that first night when he decided to let Hannah stay. She had sheltered his heart, keeping it safe and warm and loved for the rest of his days. And he had given her the same gift, creating a space where she could be herself, be safe, be cherished. They had saved each other in that barn, though neither of them knew it at the time. 2 lost souls finding each other in the darkness, creating light together that would shine for generations to come. And if you visit Verde, Nevada, even now, and ask about the Yates family, people will smile and tell you the story, each version slightly different but all of them containing the same essential truth. That love is real, that kindness matters, and that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion can change the world. They will tell you about Quinn and Hannah, about the kittens in the barn, about a legacy of love that continues to this day. And if you listen closely, they might even tell you that on quiet evenings, you can still hear singing coming from the old Yates ranch, a woman's voice humming a lullaby to comfort crying kittens or crying children, or anyone who needs to know that they are not alone, that someone cares, that love exists and endures. That is the story of Quinn Yates and Hannah Nielson, 2 ordinary people who created something extraordinary simply by choosing to be kind, to be brave, and to love each other with all their hearts. It is a story that deserves to be remembered, to be told and retold, because in a world that can often seem harsh and unforgiving, we need reminders that goodness exists, that love conquers, and that we are all capable of creating our own happy endings if we are just brave enough to try.